Hi everybody. Well, it's 10:30, and after I promised I was going to do this, I realized there was no backing out. So, welcome to NIGHTCAP. First edition, and hopefully not the last. Hope you settle in with me for some conversation. And I mean that two ways. You can converse too. You can either text in, and I'll see them, hopefully. Or actually, you can even call. Call me on my phone, 217-710-1258. And since we're calling it NIGHTCAP, feel free to fix yourself one, or not. There's a number of subjects that I was thinking about, and then Facebook, lo and behold, gave me about 6 more earlier today. So there's a lot of areas to go. For example, the first thing I was thinking was one of the major differences between people in small towns and people in big towns, big cities. And the funny thing is, when you live in a small town, if you're a kid and you're riding by on your bike, or even an adult and driving by in your car and you see a house and you don't know who lives there, and you sometimes say, I wonder who lives in that house. For any whatever reason. It could be because it's really fancy, or it could be because it's about to fall down. But the bottom line is, I don't think they do that in the big cities. Do you think, Betty? I don't know. I don't think they do that in the big city. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and this I think is really special for us, the great thing about living in a small town is usually the high school is the cultural center. I know my kids felt that way, and of course as parents, so did we. The high school is the cultural center. And for example, you have a loyalty. So you go to the school play, you go to the musicals, even when your kids are in 2nd grade, you go to that 2nd grade musical, but you follow the football team, you follow the basketball team. That's what you do because you're loyal to that school. Now, I know in the big cities, basketball is a big thing, so is football, because we see that. That's why they have 4, 5, and 6A, divisions, as well as 1, 2, and 3. But somehow I don't think in the big city, when a lot of times the games are played at 4:30 in the afternoon, that you just don't have the impact that you do. Now, I've never been to just a regular season game of a 6A school at 4:30 in the afternoon, so I may not know what I'm talking about, but I think that's the case. So what do you think? So now here I said those were 2 things that I wanted to touch on, big city versus small town. And then what did I see on Facebook today but people talking about stores that weren't around anymore? Some of them they were talking about in Hillsboro. Some of them they were talking about in Litchfield. We could put in Carlinville and Gillespie as easily, or we could put in Frankfort, Indiana, or Forestville, Missouri. All these small towns have stores that aren't there anymore. And they're all not there anymore for the very same reason. The very same reason. And that is, of course, it's not, well, let me back up a minute. Back in 1967, when the interstate system was being built, Interstate 70, of course, was the first one. But, by the mid-70s, 55 was done, 70 was done, 80 was done. When 55 replaced Route 66, a number of restaurants and businesses in Litchfield went by the wayside. The one that people always mentioned to me when I first came to town in Litchfield in 1972, of course, was the Saratoga. And of course, that was gone before I got here. Vic Suling's was gone before I got here. And all that was left, of course, in the Saratoga's case, nothing. Those Duff's roller rink, of course, long gone. In the case of Vic Suling, all that was left was the sign. And thank goodness it's all fixed and neoned up and sitting in front of the Route 66 Welcome Center and Litchfield Museum. So that's a wonderful thing. But I believe that you and I both know the reason that the small towns have lost all the businesses, and we'll list a bunch of them just to bring memories back in a minute. But you and I both know that in 1970, maybe a little before, 69 or 68, when More Value came to Litchfield, which eventually became Walmart when it was bought by Sam's company, Sam Walton, of course. And so Walmart started squeezing out small towns. Back in the mid-70s, I lived in Hillsboro, and I had a neighbor whose name was Kevin Rushton, and his folks had 3 variety stores. They were, the forerunner of, they were like Ben Franklin, they were like Woolworth. They became Rushton Variety. And there was one in Hillsboro. And Kevin and I were talking one night, and he said, I don't know how long I'm good for. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Walmart is going to replace all of our small variety stores. I said, well, we'll see. Now, of course, Litchfield had Newberry's. Newberry's was a wonderful thing. That was classified as a junior department store. And short of having a big furniture department and bedding department, it had everything pretty much, including a great lunch counter. How many deals were worked over that lunch counter at Newberry's? Or how many ham and cheese sandwiches, how many blue plate specials were done? I learned that there was a very fancy way to put butter on toast at Newberry's the first time I ate there. Thought, oh, you're not smashing the bread with a butter knife. Or, no, you're not. You're got on this roller thing with melted butter in it. But nonetheless, Newberry's was great. It was probably as much a meeting place as anything, as much as any of the bars, probably. The great thing about the Ariston and U-Belts and some of those places, they've still hung on. And we have certainly embraced our Route 66 heritage very well. And thank goodness for that. But back to what I saw today on Facebook. I saw somebody put up, we talk about the small towns. Somebody put up, what about all of these towns that are no longer around? Okay, for example, they were talking about the White Hen Pantry that Jerry and Debbie Gregory opened up back in the 70s. White Hen, that was a wonderful thing. And quite frankly, White Hen had the absolute best produce of any store in town. Of course, if you wanted to buy one apple or you wanted to buy one banana, because, they were premium. So White Hen was a great place to go for that. But White Hen, since we didn't have 7-Eleven, and White Hen was much more premium. They did the great sandwiches. They really did. They had a great Italian beef and any kind of deli sandwich you wanted, and they did it very well. I don't know why it went away. And I suppose if Jerry or Debbie were around to tell us, they would, but I don't know. I wish they never, because they were pretty darn special. But my goodness, not only White Hen, remember, of course, we had a Ben Franklin store in Hillsboro. In Litchfield, and Hillsboro, we had how many pharmacies? Think about the number of families that were raised by those pharmacies, by the owners, from Kaufman's and, my goodness, over in Hillsboro, you had Farrell's Pharmacy, you had John's Pharmacy, you had Sullivan's, of course. All these opportunities that kind of got swallowed up and put into one place. And that was, of course, Walmart. Do we go to Walmart? Sure we do. Do we spend a lot of money in Walmart? Sure we do. Do we go to Walmart for fun and enjoyment and just to have something to do? Yeah, unfortunately we do. So, that's that. We don't have the Western Auto that we used to have in Hillsboro. Al Miller ran it. Al Miller ran a great business. He was a wonderful guy, very religious guy. And he knew how to make money. He knew how to run a business. But the sad thing that happened was Walmart had everything Al had. And they had it cheaper. And the day that Al closed, he put a sign on the door. And, you know, it said something to the effect of, well, you got me. And sadly, it was true. In Litchfield, we had Austin Schrader, great hardware store. In Hillsboro, you also had Harstick's Ace Hardware. When I came to the radio station in 1972, and I was doing my interview with Mr. Talley, they gave me 3 commercials to read. And I think they wanted to trip me up because they gave me 3 of the most difficult names, if you've never seen them before, to pronounce businesses. So I had Harstick's Ace Hardware with the 2 A's in there. I had Fallsgroff's Jewelry Store, which, by the way, was the very first advertiser. The first person who signed on the dotted line and said, I'll be an advertiser on WSMI. And he said, and Mr. Fallsgroff, according to Mr. Talley, said, I will advertise with you forever as long as I can have the commercial right before the news. And of course the news was 7:45 as it is today. So when Fallsgroff's was in business, every day at 7:44:30, the Fallsgroff's commercial ran. When I came in 1972 to do the mornings to take Dave Hamlin's place, Fallsgroff's commercial, the first day I was there, didn't run exactly at 7:44:30 because I didn't get the memo, and it ran about a minute before. But I assure you, I was told, and it never failed to run at 7:44:30 during my tenure after that. So there was that. And I kid because obviously I do whatever I'm told, but I just wasn't told the first time. We look at some of the other commercials. Becky Moeller, who used to run the Stoplight Cafe, as you remember, there in Hillsboro, where the State Farm office is now. Think of some of the things we don't have anymore. Like Ben's Mail Shop, of course. The clothing stores are all gone. Ben's Mail Shop, the P and Hirsch, the Fashion Lane, both towns. P and Hirsch, I guess, in both towns. Bobby Patty had a jewelry store in Hillsboro. 80 Patty. We also had, of course, MacGuffin's at one time in Litchfield. We had Moe's Market in Hillsboro. We had a lot of neighborhood markets. People talk all the time about the neighborhood markets. And I think of Milcomas, of course, with their struggles they have right now with their Kroger store not there anymore, and how hard it has been after Bill's IGA closed to get a Kroger store. And now some people took it upon themselves to do something over there. So congratulations to them for the produce stand that Ulrich's opened up and brought in some meat and also all the produce. And then the coffee shop. So hooray for them, and I'm glad that's done. Again, just this list of things that are no longer, and I won't separate it by town, you'll probably know which one was which, but MacGuffin's, Moe's Market, Fashion Lane, both. Ben Franklin, Western Auto, Cordani's Bakery. Of course, you know, we have Black Rabbit there where Cordani's was. But it was different. You know, it's a little more. I'm too old to say the right word, I guess, but Black Rabbit is different vibe than what Cordani's was, for certain. I mentioned the Stoplight Cafe, of course, the all-night diner in Hillsboro, affectionately known as Greasy's, but was Milanes's there. Jerry and Angelo. There was also Angelo's. There was Gates Pizza, Fred Gates. Fred Gates probably made the absolute best pizzas around. I mean, right there with Pizza Man making their Litchfield special. Fred Gates had a great special, a great Supreme. So they were so good, and I think Fred sold his recipe to Larry Collins down at which became Trails End, you know, and Howlers. They did a great job down there in Taylor Springs. Also, I think of a small town like Morrisonville. We mentioned the jewelry stores. Morrisonville had a great jewelry store. The village timekeeper, a guy by the name of Harry Dillabaugh, ran it. And I mean, here's a small town, Morrisonville, and he's got a world-class horologist who can build clocks. And Harry was just an incredibly good businessman, a great guy, did a lot for the community, but he himself ran into some health problems and wound up having to move to Arizona. But so that was a loss to the town there. Morrisonville's hanging in. They don't have the benefit of Route 66, or they're right there on 48, 2 lanes going through town. Hopefully people stop. And yet they still have a great celebration, and the core of the community is very strong. Litchfield, we had Hensky's Newsstand. We had Johnny's Sporting Goods. Later on, of course, our good friend Lee Johns had a Radio Shack as well. Several pharmacies we mentioned. Paul's. Boy, how many people would go to Paul's for hamburgers? Capitol Theater. Thank goodness Steve Doherty built the West Side, or we wouldn't even have the theater. Capitol was, I think it was still going when I came in 72. Wasn't going when I came back in 76. Litchfield lost some things because of Route 66 stopped being the artery that carried the traffic when I-55 replaced it. But Litchfield lost things when Walmart came to town. And God bless Walmart, but somebody had to pay. And we know who did. And yet I saw a story today. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I saw the headlines in the Wall Street Journal that Americans are looking to the Midwest to find affordability. And I also saw a story today that said people building new houses are not putting dining rooms in their new houses. Now, if you remember, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, let's talk about the glorious 80s. Back in the 80s, people were building McMansions right and left. And, you know, vaulted ceilings and great rooms and, you know, safe rooms and bowling alley and a basement, all kinds of things. And now, today, those $400,000 and $500,000 McMansions are quickly becoming $460,000 starter homes, because that's what they say the average 2,000 square foot home costs to build new today. I talked to someone who sold prefabricated homes. I don't mean mobile homes. I mean homes that are built, stick-built homes in a factory and then brought in two pieces and set. She told me that very easily it's a minimum of about $215,000 to build a small house. Now, why no dining rooms? Because they got to save money somewhere. And they're using that space for something else. Maybe a home office or gaming. The next thing you know, the kitchen will be smaller, and there won't be room for a kitchen table, but there will be a bigger than usual island, bigger than what they usually do now. Because people are going to eat not together, but individually. And they're going to eat standing up, looking at their phone. And there's just not going to be that community family time. What do you think? Right? Wrong? We know what we'd like for it to be. We'd like to think we're going back to the 50s. No, not really. But at least going back to where we had a little more common sense and we weren't so frantic or frenetic. What we really hope is that some of our major companies that we've come to rely on stick around. We don't want to see some company that was owned by a relatively common sense approach board of directors who answered to shareholders, hang on to it and not sell it to some foreign conglomerate of 700 companies and run it into the ground and then sell it off. We don't want to see that happen over and over. I have wandered for 25 minutes, and I didn't know if I was going to have enough to say for 5. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little bit. I appreciate those of you who watched, and maybe I'll catch a few more of you if you can replay on demand tomorrow. But I will say this. If somebody doesn't talk about these things, none of these things are going to change, and things that matter someday won't matter anymore. So God bless you. Have a good night. Finish your nightcap, and we'll do this again next Monday. And hopefully I'll see some comment about whether this was worthwhile or not. Thank you, and good evening.